Everybody, welcome to Stratosphere Studio. We are doing the dual stream to Twitch and YouTube on separate platforms because Twitch was jealous about us streaming to YouTube at the same time. So I had to load some of the things we're going to show twice. So it's a bit of a delay with me getting back and forth to one or the other, but once we get rolling, it's usually pretty good. Hope everybody's doing well. And I guess we might as well just roll right into some of the new stuff, talk a little bit about some things, take some questions, and then gonna roll because we got a bunch of other things to do. But nevertheless, we're here for our show, so that's good to hear. Yeah, so let's just get some of this latest animation out of the way. And again, it's going to just be a little bit of delay while I go back and forth between the two. We've got been working on building out the control room for Major Mace Mattingly, because I'm going to do that interview. The test footage we saw of the interview several weeks ago was with them in a TV studio. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but I wanted to see how good I could get the lighting on those guys. So I've got an asset for a TV studio for the woman, for the interviewer, Lauren, I think her name is. No? So that'll be inside a TV studio, but the four guys have to be somewhere on the moon, so I decided to put them in the control room, which means we need to build out the interior of the control room. We got a pretty good exterior view, which I've shown several times. So we started building out the interior, and I say we because I've been getting some help from our friend Chris Goodwin, who's been a viewer here and Strato person for a while, and sent in that tremendous rendering of just of the power unit several weeks ago for Major Mace Mattingly. So he's been helping with this, and you'll see some of his work in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and do these one by one here, and then we'll come to super chat. So again, sorry if there's a bit of delay between the two. So first things first here, let's go. We'll go to the blue screen back and forth. So everybody just hang loose. And let's see here. So that'll be this one. Okay, so first things first, this little animation is called Retro Computers. Obviously, we wanted to have computers in there that look like they're from the period, and the main thing we're really looking for is that kind of, just that sort of sense of, see if I can tee these things up again here. We're looking for that sense of, come on now. Why isn't that working? There we go. So we're looking for that sense of old school stuff with the tape computers and the rewind and stuff, which I think is just really, really fun. And I really like the way it looks when we go to darkness on those. It just gives it a really nice. Just one more time for giggles here. Come on, Billy, you can do it. This is so confusing with these two different things. One more time on the retro computers. So they look, I think, pretty good. Here they are one more time. And I especially like watching the tapes doing their thing. So the thing I was trying to mention is once the light goes down, what I'd like for this control room to look like is Christmas, Christmas morning with the Christmas tree lights. So now we'll take a look at the first of the control room animations here. So I'll turn that one off, turn this one on, and we'll turn this one off, and we'll turn this one on. And it's got a nice vibe to it. That big metal thing in the middle of the floor there is going to go away. I'm trying to figure out how to get that to go away. But there are the computers in the background, and already it's starting to get a feel. And you'll notice, shockingly enough, that the sorry that the boy, this is so confusing. You'll notice that the that giant lump in the bottom is going to go. Oh, and the wall panels. It's not the typical science fiction, dystopia where everything is nothing but bare metal and hissing, steam things. It's almost like people had to live in there for 60 years. So I just think that's really different look, and I really like it a lot. I think it's going to play really well when we get the thing completely buffed out and in there. So. Sorry. Okay, and one more just for fun. I It's basically the same thing. Change the lighting a little bit, and I put Gordo in there for scale, and then I realized maybe not the right guy for scale. He's really really tiny. In fact, he's so tiny I was sure I'd had to make him bigger, and then I realized, well, hang on. I mean, I don't know if he's barely 5 foot, 5'1". And I thought, well, that's actually kind of different and kind of cool. Besides, if the progressives are right, then nobody who's below average height will ever accomplish anything unless they can see themselves on the screen first to identify with it, So that's the theory that I don't particularly subscribe to. But one more here with Gordo in there for scale. So let's go ahead and see if we can get that going here. Not this one. And let's see here. Not that one, that one. So, just yeah. So I think it looks really pretty cool, and I am looking forward to building out the rest of it. As I mentioned, Chris did the mission control consoles; they look fantastic, and we're going to put an American flag on the wall, and there's going to be pictures in the place, and then when they get into the habitats, the halls are they're carpeted, and there's just all kinds of cool stuff there, and Mace is going to have a couple of posters on the wall of like waves because he used to be a surfer, and going to almost be, as I said, like people actually lived there. It's funny how when you get like a science fiction trope, and it sticks, then there's no getting rid of it. A good example of this would be like greebles on the hulls of spaceship, those little tiny little things that they put in to give you a sense of scale. Once that appeared in 2001: A Space Odyssey, they're everywhere and they never go away. And Ridley Scott invented the look of the future in Alien and Blade Runner, and so every city now is going to be dark and rainy and have lots of Japanese neon signs up, and every interior of every spaceship, including every video game ever made since then, is just steel walls with a big 4, like 04 and an arrow, and then just numbers on things that mean nothing, and dark, really dark, and nothing but bare metal, no art on the wall ever. I've never ever seen a science fiction game or a recent science fiction movie that had any kind of art on the wall, and it's just ridiculous. So it's nice to be able to go in there and play around, have some stuff that is surprising because it's pretty human and pretty livable. I do have to say it is very confusing doing two of these at the same time. It's pretty tough. Actually, I was going to do Dave Big Booty said, "What about the NASA meatball?" And I thought, yeah, and then I realized, no, this is not a NASA project. I got to take the NASA logo off of their uniforms, actually, off of their spacesuits. I've got a good Project Horizon suit. I think what I'll probably do is have Project Horizon, and then like Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. Even though there are no Marines up there now, there were when they were building this thing. So all of this stuff just looks cool to me. on the animations, you just saw one of the. So it may seem a minor thing, but it's really not. There's just a cutout for the window on the inside, and we're going to get that, that pressurized kind of frame there, and that'll help a lot. I've got some corners to fill. I hope everybody's sitting down. I was thinking that in some of these corners, it's a hexagonal room and the walls slope in, so it's a little tough to match. I was actually thinking in some of those corners I might even put some plants or something. Think about that. Plants like ferns. Like it was a real office. So overall, I'm real happy with the look. I'm happy with the vibe. I like the computers a lot. I love the mission control desks, and I'm trying real hard to get rid of that metal bump in the bottom of the floor. And frankly, I don't really need it there. So just so you know, we've got the exterior of the space station. We've had that for months now. And so to build the interiors to make them correct in terms of scale, I just took the control room exterior and then zoomed inside it. It's got an interior, but it's not very good. And I started building out the panels and the hex and stuff. And so really, once I get everything more or less built, I can just take the exterior out, and we've just got a hexagonal set with it's got that nice kind of paneling on the walls there. We're going to have little pin spots instead of this harsh lighting. Out the window, you'll see the surface of the moon, obviously. And again, tiny little pieces of chrome that just come to me every now and then, little itty-bitty little things that on their own mean nothing, but in aggregate have kind of a cool effect. I don't know if I'm going to put this in the interview or not, but I probably will. So they're going to be sitting in front of the, Dave Big Booty says the bump on the floor is where they put the tiki bar. Actually, since the control room's on the top, that's probably going to be a circle, and it's going to be a spiral staircase down to or ladders. Ladders probably a little better, I think. Yeah, definitely a ladder. So they're, so they can get up and down from this thing. But one of these little pieces of chrome. So I thought, we have to have a flag on the wall. And then I thought, well, actually, come to think of it, they should probably have a flag outside, too. And then I thought, all right, so why don't we have a flagpole visible out the window when they do this interview? American flag's out there. It's high enough to be seen from this window. And it's just slowly moving in the breeze like that. And she says, well, I noticed you got a flag out the window. Yes, well, can't have a moon base without a flag. It appears that that flag is blown in the wind, and there's kind of silence, like it's a private joke. And then Grimm says, yeah, I kind of did that. Well, the flagpole's pretty flexible, and that's not a problem because there's no wind up here. But I had a little time to kill, so I just kind of went out to the flagpole and I put a little electric motor out there with a little off-center cam on it. And I basically bolted it to the bottom of the flagpole. It's out of sight, you can't see it, but when the cam goes around, moves the flagpole just a little bit, and that sets up the flag waving. Right now we're set on gentle breeze, and he reaches over, says, we go to hurricane if you want to, and turns this thing up, and then this thing starts going, why would you go to all that trouble? He says, mostly just to piss off the conspiracy guys more than anything, just because we had time on our hands. That stuff makes me smile. And then let's see, I missed a super chat here. Here it is. It's our friend Cody Fett again, who's so generous with these things. Hey, Bill, simple question. How much do we have to pay you to get you to try a Let's Play of Starfield? Is it released yet? Starfield, it's a new game that's single player, but I think it's got Star Citizen a little worried. I love the ship designs in Starfield. There's no way I can start playing it. I don't have anything like time for that. When maybe in October, if I get everything else done out of the way. But early access, it looks really cool. And I really, when I saw the ship and the the vertical thrusters and stuff, everything looks like kind of like Prometheus. I thought that was great. And I saw some gameplay or some loops from 6 months ago, and they were showing how you can build your own ship, just basically modular and stuff. I thought, oh, that's really kind of nice. it's anyway. Um, by the way, I've had for a while a Star Citizen account with a bunch of stuff in it. If anybody out there is playing Star Citizen and would like to buy that account, just send an email to info@billwhittle.com. There's some really, really, really cool stuff in there that's just not available in the game anymore. I got all kinds of ships and fighters, and I've just been sitting on it for, I don't know, 4 years now. So I'm going to put an ad up in, there's like trades on Reddit for Star Citizen or something. So yeah, so I'd like to see that. Anyway, back to the real world. So talk a little more science fiction. I want to talk about the interview show, and then we'll go to some questions. One of the people I wanted to interview when I saw the cameo thing very early was Bill Mumy for Lost in Space, and I kept thinking, man, I really just, there's nobody there from classic Star Trek. And then I realized Vic Mignogna is there, so I went back and watched a number of Star Trek Continues episodes, including some of the Kickstarter things that he did, and it gave me some big ideas in terms of how that works. I mean, he was successful with 2 or 3 of them, and some of the things he was offering. But I watched a fair amount of Star Trek Continues in my ample free time for the last 3 or 4 days, and I would really like to interview him and just geek out, because the level of detail is so incredible, and I really would like to get into the weeds about that. I was on the only chance I get to listen to anything now is on the drive to and from the studio. I was listening on the way back last night to one of the Drinkers After Hours things, talking about Ascoa, whatever that new Star Wars film is. Not so much a Star Wars guy, but they were just talking about how dumb it is and how lazy it is, and how they got the shields knocked down, and some guy was saying, and then these blasters just start hitting the hull and nothing happens, doesn't do anything. And I'm listening to these guys talking about this, and I've had these kind of conversations. Ahsoka, sorry, yeah. I've had these kind of conversations myself about Star Trek, and well, this did this, and I realized this is the problem with these people today, with the writers of Star Trek and Star Wars and all the rest of it, and that is that you could say, well, maybe they're too woke, or maybe they're too this or they're too that, but the bottom line is, it's not even that they don't care, it's just that they don't take it seriously, they don't believe it. They just don't. And I'm listening to these guys, and every science fiction fan's had these kind of conversations. Well, it wouldn't do that. Well, what if it did this? Then this would happen. And if you went through this at this rate, it would. And I realized that science fiction and fantasy only work and become these incredible genres because people take it seriously. And the people who are writing this stuff these days don't. They just don't. So they'll just do things like shields, deflector shields in Star Wars. I don't remember that being a big part of it, but our shields are now at 10%. Okay. Well, now that our shields are gone. And the blasters hit the hull and nothing happens. And it's just, they just don't care. They don't care and they don't know. So they're saying, oh, I know, we'll throw in our shields are at 10%. That'll give us a sense of danger. But as Drinker, I didn't see it, but as Drinker in the group was saying, it's not like they were ever sounding worried or anything. There's no concern. And this is when I had this big eye-opening realization about like the meta of this is that they don't take it seriously. They just don't. None of it is taken seriously. And I suppose from the point of view of a normie, you could just look at this and say, well, what do you mean take it seriously? Well, the reason it works is because it was a great deal of effort went into making it believable. I'm much more comfortable getting back to Star Trek on this. And when you get people that don't care, it just gets awful. Speaking of awful, I heard that Strange New Worlds got canceled. Couldn't happen to a nicer show. Um, I had heard it was coming, and then I saw the clip. At least I saw the first 4 or 5 minutes of it. Uh, there's apparently the Enterprise under Captain Pike and the rest of the crew who are as faceless and bland as anything. I have no idea who they are, and I can't tell them apart. Spock is played by, you know, a guy who probably auditioned for a, you know, frickin' auto insurance ad or something. He's completely ordinary looking. There's nothing different about him. Leonard Nimoy looks like he's from another world. Just look at him standing there next to these other guys, and he just looks like a freaking alien. Blandy McBlanderson is, to say the least, infidel 42. So, anyway, this is a rant I do want to make. So, on this episode, they encounter some kind of energy field that works its way through the ship, and it causes them to start singing. So they call down, and I think Spock's an engineer, and somebody said, "Mr. Spock, what's happening?" And he starts singing the answer. And I know he's supposed to look amazed and shocked, but he's just a terrible actor, and he doesn't have any understanding of the character either. So he's just slightly puzzled that he's singing, just slightly puzzled. There have been episodes in the original series where Spock had emotions or showed emotions, and he was mortified. Whenever he was being controlled into doing something, you could just see how repulsive it was to him and how much he was fighting it. This guy just breaks into song. Everybody else starts breaking into song. And then they get on the bridge and everybody's singing. And I read the comments on YouTube, and every single one of them was, "This is the most wonderful thing ever." And I'm sure that is all astroturfed, because this is the most incredible that Star Trek has ever been. It's so fresh. It's so wonderful. Oh, wow. Oh, my God. What an incredible... I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan. I started watching Star Trek in 1966, and I didn't think the musical would work, but it was tremendous. That exact same comment like 55 times. So first of all, screw you. Secondly, this is what I mean by not taking it seriously, right? They're just commenting on it. They're commenting on it. They're out of ideas. They don't know where to go with it. So they're just kind of riffing on it. And a number of people in the comments said, it's because they did this on Below Decks, which is an animated version that completely trashes the entire idea of Star Trek. It's just nothing but snark. It's like the Steve Colbert Captain Kirk, you know? Just like anytime you give an order, it's kind of a little look to camera, you know, a little snark, like, I can't believe you idiots are taking this seriously. Yeah, Eric says, lest we forget there was the original series episode, Plato's Stepchildren, where the aliens had Spock singing. Yes, they forced him to do it, and he was in pain constantly. They forced him to do a lot of things. They didn't just break into song. This thing it was just plain revolting to me. And it was revolting to me on a lot of levels. But the main reason it was revolting to me, more than anything, is because unlike Plato's Stepchildren, which had an interesting take on what absolute power does to people, this was just plain bored. Just, yeah, what are we going to do? I don't know. We could do a musical. Yeah, why not? We haven't done a musical. Sure. It's like watching season 35 of The Simpsons. It's like you know, I don't want to see this anymore. It's like a terminal patient who you really loved and somebody you haven't seen in a while, and you walk into the room and they're so emaciated and so far gone that you, number one, you have a hard time recognizing them, and secondly, you just didn't want that to be your last memory of this thing. And the whole thing is just so cynical. That's the word. It's just cynical. And this was the one thing that Star Trek never was. It was never cynical. It was always about possibilities. And down 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 it goes. But yeah, just jumped the shark already. They jumped the entire freaking Pacific Ocean. You know, they jumped 700 sharks. And I'm watching these people doing this, and what I'm really getting is this show, that episode, but but the entire series and Picard and Discovery and all the rest of this crap and all of the, third season of Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, all of it. It's all written by people who have no interest in science fiction at all, none. They're all just plain bored, and they want to do a musical theater show. So it's kind of, it's kind of Queer Eye meets the Enterprise kind of thing, or Glee. Glee is a better example. That's what I was actually thinking of. Okay, so now you've taken Star Trek to the level of Glee. Okay, there's nothing I can do about that. First of all, it's not Star Trek. Call it whatever you want to, but it's not. And the just the sheer plain disrespect for the material. They don't respect the material because they don't understand the material. They don't understand the material because they're not smart enough to understand the material. They don't have any. Nothing I've seen from the writing ever indicates to me that anything that's been written for Star Trek or Star Wars in the last 25 years has ever been written by a human being that's ever had any kind of real emotions, and that includes you, George Lucas. And, it's just lazy and stupid and tired and old, and I'm just sick of it. Now, that brings us to back to Star Trek Continues. Because as opposed to all of this stuff that's coming out of the garbage machine at Disney, that show was made by people who really cared and got every single detail right. I'm curious to talk to Vic Mignogna about a bunch of things on that. One of the problems with, and this is not something I'm going to fall into, but one of the problems with Star Trek Continues as fan film is they had to crowdsource it. And I'm convinced that a lot of the people working on the show were in the show because they either contributed money or because they had just been working on it forever. But Star Trek Continues has moments when it's absolutely epic. It's just it's canonical as far as I'm concerned. But there's awful lot of times where the acting is just so awful. It's just so bad. Vic is never bad. The Spock that they had, Todd Haberkorn, I think, something like that, wasn't bad. He looked different. He looked alien. He looked weird, and he wasn't at all bad. So you're there. The McCoy they had for the first 2 episodes was unwatchable, just unwatchable. And I thought it was the same guy through the whole series, and I finally looked at it, and they got rid of the guy after 2 episodes and replaced him with a guy who was better. But I never really got the McCoy thing. And then you just work your way through the crew, and their Uhura was actually pretty good. Their Chekhov was not good. Grant Imahara was playing Sulu, who he just plain died. Grant from Mythbusters, he had an aneurysm 2 years ago, just plain dropped. And I loved him on Mythbusters, and I love his personality. I love everything about the guy, but he's not an actor. And again and again and again, I'm watching this amazing amount of detail that was just so incredible. And then I'm looking at at just how it just kind of falls down sometimes because it was just. I mean, you go to all that trouble, the lighting, the costumes, the 4:3 aspect ratio, the everything. And then, some of these performances are just horrible. Just take you right out of it, horrible. And I just find that to be a real shame. And I guess, I don't know if it comes with the territory or not, but most of the fan films I see, Star Trek fan films or Star Wars fan films, they're fan films. And, so they have varying levels of quality, but generally speaking, they're not terribly well acted. And it's a shame. I thought Grant was just awful as an actor in this thing, and I just, every time he would speak, I'm out of the thing. Mignogna, on the other hand, was so spot on with Kirk that there are many times watching episodes of that when I just thought, that's actually Bill Shatner. Oh, no, it's not quite. But the mannerisms and the he didn't comment on Shatner. He didn't do a Shatner impression. He used the same cadences, used the same manners, mannerisms, but he never mocked him, which is what they did with Strange New Worlds. They're just mocking it now. They're just having a laugh. Yeah, and Copy Shinato points out that Scotty on Star Trek Continues was played by Chris Doohan, Jimmy Doohan's son, and he did a great job. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was absolutely great. And the other thing I noticed watching a few of those things, which is true for the larger picture on everything really, that there were a number of episodes that were terrific, and then there were a number of episodes of Star Trek Continues that were just not, and they weren't good because they were so heavy-handed about the message, the message. Here's your message for this episode. The original series did that as well, and every time that they tried to do a message episode, turned out to be the worst episodes in the entire series. And two examples came to mind. They did an episode, I'm talking about the original series now, did an episode on how bad racism is. And that was the episode where Frank Gorshin is chasing this other guy, and Frank Gorshin has one half of his face is white and the other half of his face is black. And he's chasing this other guy, but the other guy has one half of his face black and the other half white, you see? That's our lesson on racism. And I thought, oh, man. They did one called The Cloud Minders, where there's a city floating in the sky, and all these miners down here are, the poor working proles, and then Enterprise is going to come in, and they're going to set the social justice scale correct, and then all they end up doing is getting like filters for the people working in the mines. It's like, this is the point that I'm trying to make here with this, and that is that Star Trek is successful when it doesn't try to be beating you over the head with the message. The fact of the matter is, you just look at the Bridge of the Enterprise and you got, let's remember 1966, we're in a Cold War with the Russians. 20 years earlier, we'd finished a life and death battle with the Japanese. So we got a Japanese navigator sitting next to a Russian helmsman. We have a black communications officer. We have a Scottish engineer. We've got an alien from another planet who's the executive officer, and nobody cares. And that's why it worked. But the more that they put into this, the more they try to drive that message home, the worse I felt about it. In the Star Trek Continues thing, there was an episode called What Ships Are For. And they go down to this planet where the solar radiation has done something to inhibit the rods of your eyes, so that on the planet you can only see black and white. And it's all about these people that live in this nice planet, and all about them stopping these refugees from crossing the border, and and all they do is bring crime, and all, we have to stop them. And Kirk is, no, these people have a place to live. What are you saying? They don't have a right to live. They don't have a right to freedom. You don't have a right to live a better life. And it's just this one giant lecture about the border. It was written, I'm sure it was produced during the Trump presidency. So here's our big message about how we should just not worry about the borders, and any refugees that want to come in, just welcome them with open arms. And it's like, it's not that the issue doesn't have merit. It's just that it was so lazy, and it was so simple, and so, just bam, 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 bam. Like the first line in this thing, this alien, they go to this planet and they've never seen Federation people before, and this woman looks at Spock. She says, "Oh, are you a human female?" And he says, "No, I'm not. I'm a member of a different race." And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult you." And then Spock says, "Why would I be insulted? I don't see either gender as being superior to the other one." And just this kind of little speech, And it's like, oh, okay, got it, great, thanks, thanks. The way you prove this point, you idiots, is not to come out and lecture people about it. The way you prove the point is Uhura is the best in Starfleet at her job. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to give it to me with the hammer. I'm so freaking sick of being lectured during what's supposed to be entertainment. Just lectured, just constantly told, well, you should be doing this, you should be feeling this, you should be feeling that, and you should be feeling this. And this is one person's opinion. There's never the other side of the argument, portrayed. And it's like, boom, here you go. All right, great. Thanks, man. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And this just kind of takes me to, and I'm about done with this rant. This kind of takes me to TikTok, because I look at TikTok and I see this is a platform designed exclusively to allow people to lecture other people. You know, look into the little camera lens. Like, some people think that the transgender pronouns thing is, but it's not. It's problematic. Let me tell you why. Oh, please tell me why. You've got such perspective on life. You know, you've got so many different and varied perspectives to draw on. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about this. Sidewings Raging says, and that is why I quit watching TV decades ago. The message. Yeah, the message. Star Trek was a part of changing the world in terms of acceptance for things like this, and it did it without having to do episodes like the Cloud Minders and let that be your last battlefield, and you know, that's what ships are for. Every time they get out on this wagon and just start on their soapbox and just starts whacking people over the head with what you're supposed to think, I'm gone. I'm out of there. And I bring this up only because I love the show so much. I love the original show so much, and I love Star Trek Continues so much that when Star Trek Continues started doing that, it just really pissed me off. It's just, oh, so you're gonna go down Cloudminder's road, are you? Okay, well, that's your business. You know, if you got something you want to say, by all means, just let me know. Was it a private little war? I don't remember. I used to know every one of the 72 episodes. I'd be lucky if I get half of them off now. But with all that said, the amount of detail that Star Trek Continues put into it, and they put a lot of imagination into getting it right, not just copying things. For example, when they needed a prop or an alien, it looked exactly like a prop or an alien that they would have made in 1966. The props look as cheesy as the original props did. And the same for the aliens. That's just an incredible labor of love there that whole thing was. And they got 12 episodes, and they raised hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more. And it set a bar so high that I don't think anybody's ever going to touch it. I'd seen fan films, Star Trek fan films, Star Wars fan films before Star Trek Continues. I've seen them afterwards, and nothing comes even close to this. Nothing. And I guess that's got to be pretty much exclusively, Vic. Just when I saw it shot in 4:3 format, I just thought, wow, the old TV-style square-looking box format. And all the things they could have done with computer graphics and special effects and didn't. And I was wondering about that. Eric Blake says, you'll be glad to hear that Axanar is still being made. Yeah, what happened with Axanar? I know they got sued and that whole thing, and, I don't know. The teaser for Axanar was just so beautifully acted. Just perfectly, because they had real professional actors. Gary Graham's a friend, and it was just beautifully acted. My gripe with Axanar is they fall into the trap of, we're going to make the Enterprise like a fighter jet, and we're going to have it loop and spin and roll, and it's going to roll, and yeah, okay, whatever, I don't know. And sometimes Richard Hatch was great, and I miss him too. I don't know. Connolly Stevens says Strange New Worlds was not canceled, Discovery was. Okay, well, in any event, Marisha says, what pisses me off as a creator is all this swill gets recycled and remade, yet works like mine get ghosted and buried. Yes, exactly. How much great material out there either wasn't made, will never be made, or is waiting to be made for the price of, a day's worth of shooting on any one of these recycled garbage-a-thons. And you know the thing that really is most surprising to me about this is they've run this stuff through the deflavorizer and recycled these franchises so many times now. There's nothing left in them. There's just no juice left in any of them, and nobody cares anymore. But I'm not really surprised. I'm just noting that there's nothing new. The last new show that made an impression at all, I think, was The Expanse, and that was, when did that first debut? 15 years ago, maybe 10. There's nothing new. There's no one's doing a movie that's going to be a franchise. There's no new Alien. There's no new Star Trek. No new Star Wars. You know, the comic book thing is just so played out, and no one's doing anything new. It's just, I like that very much. Scorch 191 says all of these series are like gum stuck under the desk. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, if you can't give it to people who love it, then leave it alone. But that's of course not going to happen, because it's not about caring anymore. It's about squeezing the last drops of money out of this thing, out of all these things, and it's just really sad. And I'm sorry to see it. But I would like to talk to Vic about it, and I'd like to talk to him about where he, felt like he succeeded and where he felt like he didn't, and it is, when it's on, when it's really good, and it's often really good, it's just exactly like being there. There's it's really a remarkable piece of work, really is. So anyway, 2015 for The Expanse, so not quite that long ago, 8 years ago, something like that. Okay. Sorry. I'll do it right then. Can I get a channel? Says George Orwell. There is a school that I have to drive past, private school now, on the way to work and back every day. It's a lovely school. And somewhere around 6 months ago, they put up a banner across the chain link fence outside the school. And it said, this school is committed to, it might have said income and, but it certainly said something and gender equity. I think it said this school is committed to income and gender equity. And right behind that was a graphic of two hands shaking hands, just two hands shaking, real simple line drawing. And I thought, I would really like to take 1984, the great version with John Hurt, and play it for them. Say, here's this dystopian future, and they think, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen in Trump's America, because INGSOC, English Socialism, it is the exact graphic. It's not like close; it's the exact graphic from INGSOC. So they're sitting there talking about how wonderful things are, and they're using the logo of the face of the perpetual fascist tyranny in 1984. I thought, my gosh, isn't that just a little bit ironic? They don't have a clue. Interesting times. Okay, so there's some things I do want to just talk about real quick, because we are getting ready. I've got the one of the presents is right here, just off the side of the table for Mr. Voigt. It's just right there. And we got the other one for Mr. Sinise has arrived, so that needs just a little bit of work to get done. So I'm hoping we can record these things next week. And I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about some format feedback, because I've got to really lock it down, make a decision. I am almost 100% certain I'm going to have to change the name of this thing and change the format of the thing from archetypes And the reason is not so much that I'll run out of archetypes, is that I just find it to be just too restrictive. For example, um, you know, when I get a chance to talk to Gary, I'm going to want to talk to him about a little bit, at least, about Apollo 11, and I don't know how to work that into archetypes. Um, I think that the meta for the show is sound. You know, we can learn about the human condition by having actors talk about the human condition because they're essentially translators. They can tell us what it's like to be a psychopath, what it's like to be a hero, what it's like to be, bitter, and all of these things, and where it comes from. But I think trying to pinhole these things into these sort of archetypes, which I thought was an interesting idea, I still think it's an interesting idea. I'm really beginning to think it's a little bit restrictive, a little bit too of a straitjacket. So I'm looking for mostly alternative titles, and I think probably something more along the lines of what it is we're really trying to say. One of the, I'm kind of thinking too. It's not going to be American anything. That's not going to be in there. Schmedlik said, "Being human." Being human is pretty much the that's almost exactly where I was. Being human is a possibility. I actually thought, the humanity is a possibility. I thought building a better human is a possibility. But basically, something about being human is already a show. Yeah, I think it might be. How to be a human. All of these things. None of them really just ring me the right way, and I have to be careful because I don't want to. The reason I did the archetypes idea was because I did not want this to be just a general kind of a, hey, John, so, was it fun working on, National Treasure? And then you can get into things like the human condition, which are a little bit too BBC and a little bit too stuffy. My first thought for the show was to call it In the Moment. I don't know what that means exactly. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just overreacting to it. Because there's something about the structure of archetypes. I kind of like the Humanity. Archetype was the best. Well, this is why I'm asking. Because I don't want it to get muddy, and I don't know. I'm just prepping hard for these interviews, and I'm trying to I think if I can give an example here of what I'm trying to say here. If I were to take John, for example, I was gonna see. Even this is where the word archetypes is a bit of a problem too, because the thing I wanted to talk to John about was vulnerability. It was about portraying vulnerability and how effective that is in Midnight Cowboy and in The Champ. You got these tough kind of guys, but at the same time he reveals there's something to these guys that is it ennobles them, it saves them somehow. And as another person, or maybe the same person, different comments. The Humanity's got a little bit of a archness to it. It's not taking itself too seriously. But it's also a little bit vague, and I'm just, this may all be, just a giant bout of sound and fury signifying nothing. I may just get over it. But Marisha suggests behind the archetype. If I'm going to go with behind the archetype, I might as well just go with archetypes, because I'm just really struggling with it. It has to be focused, and for example, if I entitled an episode "Vulnerability with John Boyd," or playing vulnerability, or whatever, that's kind of right where I want to be. But I don't know what to call that exactly. How do you want the show to feel in one line? I want the show to feel like I just want you to, first thing that flew into my mind was how much I like "Smarter Every Day" as a show title for the work that he does over there. It's just a great title. And now, I hadn't played around with the word story, but story is really the essence of it. That actually just flew into my head just now. And the more I think about that, the better it feels. Because essentially that's really what it is. It's how do storytellers teach us about ourselves. The more I think about story, the more I realize everything we learn is from stories. We learn everything of value from stories, and when we're not learning, it's because somebody hasn't made it a good enough story. And when I talk about Taffy 3, for example, I'm recounting factual information, but I'm doing it in a storytelling way, and that's what I think makes it entertaining. I never quite realized exactly how much of everything is story. And I look, just thinking about it in real time, I realized that the reason that Apollo 11 has such a profound effect on me is because it's just a great story. SpaceX is a great story. When I think about it, I don't think about it as, oh, here's this, here's a higher ISP for the engines, or here's the economy. I don't think about pounds, per dollar into orbit. I don't think any of that stuff. It's an interesting and cool story. And in the case of SpaceX, the thing that makes SpaceX an interesting story in a way that Boeing isn't an interesting story is because you've got a guy who's doing interesting storytelling things, like putting a convertible into solar orbit, and referencing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he's got a recovery barge called "Of Course I Still Love You." It's just interesting storytelling. FN Geek AZ says there's an old Steve Jobs quote: "The storyteller is the most powerful person in the world," and I'm fairly sure it was Plato who said, "Give me your poetry or whatever, and I can change society." So, the humanity is coming up now and then, and I really do think that maybe that's it, because it's the only thing I've come up with that I really felt that's kind of clever. Thank you very much. Veronica said you tell some of the best stories ever. It's and I thought about Marissa's got a couple of variations on what we can learn, and I ran some of those past Natasha, and she said, "You want young people to be a part of this? You're going to call it, like life lessons or something." I think was one of the things. Maybe the human story, or that's not awful. Oh, hang on. I wonder if there's something that can be done with that. Oh, that's the story of my life. The story of my life's not bad. I should probably be thinking about this and, not on camera when we're just sitting here watching a guy not saying anything is not very good. Story of my life, it just needs something. It needs just a little spin on it, just a little tiny little carom, just a little bit of back English on it. I can't quite figure out what it is. It's very close, I think. The stories of my life is the kind of thing I'm talking about with a little English on it. The stories of my life. Let me think about that. Is there anything wrong with the Bill Whittle show? Yeah. Yeah, then it gets Days of Our Lives, I don't want it to be my life either. I don't know, the story of your life. And if I call it the story of your life, then people are gonna think it's a biography about, John or Gary or whoever. I guess I'll work on this on my own. I may end up going back to archetypes because at least that made sense to me, on some level. But I don't know how to reconcile Lieutenant Dan and Ken Mattingly and fit them into the same archetype. There's a lot of people, politicians, and you're hearing this a lot from Biden and Democrats. It's like, that's not who we are. And it's like, what about it's not a question of that's who we are, that's how we are. Yeah. I'm tempted to just call it hot mic based on Eric's comment because I just had so much fun doing those hot mic things. I'll figure something out. Archetypes is not intriguing to me. That's good. Thank you, Bob. That's actually kind of what I need. I think the ingredients are on the table. I just don't know exactly what the recipe is yet in terms of the dose. Yeah, and K Wolf says millennials and Zoomers aren't likely to flock to a show called Archetypes. See, this is great. Yeah, ask GPT to come up with something creative. Well, you never know. You can be surprised, I guess. I do a show with once every month or two for with Father McTeague. It's a Catholic priest, and I really enjoy those shows because he's very, very smart. He had a book title I liked a lot. He wrote a book about Christ called "I Have Someone to Tell You." I think that's really excellent. That's the kind of thing I'm actually looking for. I just don't exactly know what it is. Solomon Abel with "Hold My Beer." I got to tell you, man, that's high on my list. I really, really like that quite a lot. I'll work it out. Yes, I have someone to tell you. Someone to tell you. I want to tell you something like that. Who knows? Oh yeah. Oh, for a muse of fire. Again, it's got a. I really want to reach an audience that's not already here. All right. Well, obviously, this is something I'm gonna have to just puzzle out on my own, and I'll have a list of names and things. I really thought I pretty much had it, but I think story's a real good possibility. I'll find it. Okay, I'll find it. All right, so let's jump into the questions section here and see what we can accomplish therein. Maybe tell me someone I don't know. That's not awful. Yeah, tell me someone I don't know. That there's something potentially there too. Well, I'll have to chew this up a little bit. But anyway, we're about ready to go on that, so I'm looking forward to getting started on it. All right, here we go. These members. Because it does kind of go to the essence of what the show is. All right. I can't do both of these at the same time. I just need to get on with this, and I'll sort this out. I'll probably figure it out on a drive home somewhere, or in a shower or something, where all the great ideas come up. Here we go. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Okay, let's get through these, and then I think I will knock it off, and we'll keep going. All right, so the first question is from our friend Eric Blake. Hey, Bill, do you remember the Dos Equis Most Interesting Man in the World marketing campaign? Yes, it was brilliant. Well, the whole Bud Light matter got me reflecting on that classic ad series and really struck me how much it was about, well, being a man. So far, so good. Beyond the main commercials, there's a set of brief shorts of said Most Interesting Man at a bar with a bottle of Dos Equis giving witty asides and pointers on masculinity. The reason I bring it up here is I can't help wondering if you might take some inspiration on from how effortlessly cool it all is, and maybe have Mace Mattingly do something like that, give some nice pointers to the young men of today while drinking a can of Hams. Who knows, maybe Hams will be a game to sponsor the show for the product placement. What do you think? I think that this is one of the main things that appealed to me once I got away from the idea of it just being a guy alone on the moon saying, "Get off my lawn." I think the more I think about Mace Mattingly, the more. You know what? I'll just tell you what flew into my head. I'd kind of like him to be kind of like Ray Spannon, you know, Mace Bannon. For those of you who watched Johnny Quest, it was like, okay, your dad's busy. Yeah, turns out my dad's busy too. Benton Quest is down in the lab working on something, so he's got this guardian who's like a, you know, action hero kind of guy, and I remember watching that show as a kid and thinking, oh, that would be great if I had a Ray Spannon was, you know, my friend. And I'm mocking it, but I'm kind of serious about it. So I'd like very much for that character to be wise like that. And a number of comments from when we posted the tests up on Stress for Studios YouTube page, and a number of people said we can still see your mannerisms in this, Bill, because you changed the voices, but the mannerisms are still there. And I thought, well, that's true. There's no question that when I did that last cut of the interview, Mace Mattingly with his eyes and his, that's definitely me, but I really liked it. So I think that's going to stay. It doesn't matter if one character is exactly like me. I just have to make sure they're not all exactly like each other. I thought I did okay with Steve and Gordo, and Doug is a bit like me too. I'm overall pretty happy with him. But the point is, you get to have a conversation, and I think we were talking about this last time with Doomcock and how brilliant it is to bring in these other characters. He can set up a conversation with them. You can play both sides of the issue, and you can get all of these things together. So, yeah. Now on to the masculinity thing. However, I think that's really, really interesting. Where was I going with this? Where was I going with this? Yeah, I remember it had something to do with the Dos Equis guy. I know when I was talking with Adam Baldwin about doing the show, we went off on a 20-minute riff about being about being a man, and I think that's really important. It's one of the things I want to explore on the interview show. And I think there's a real need for it, and I think that need is being filled with, what's his name? The whole manosphere thing is not the answer. It's better than the porridge that they're living with, but it's not, that's not the answer. One of the reasons I've been fighting with this archetype thing is because I got the whole conversation with Gary about Lieutenant Dan pretty well blocked out in my head, but there's a lot about Ken Mattingly that in Apollo 13 that bears mentioning. I talked about the idea of super truth and the fact that Mattingly wasn't out there watching the launch by himself in his Camaro, in his Corvette. He was at mission control, and how it's not true the way they did it in the movie, but it's super true. Ken Mattingly's not the kind of guy who's going to run off and get drunk and cry in his beer, but he probably wanted to. And so that's where storytelling becomes storytelling, and why we don't just record people. It's a different. See, the reason I want to talk about that is because that's the difference between fiction and nonfiction. You could have played it exactly as it happened, and it wouldn't have been as good. So where does the story begin and the history end? There's a lot of drama in Apollo 13, in the real life Apollo 13, but it's a much better movie when you make decisions like having Gary Sinise off on some secluded, back road that he has access to, watching the launch of Apollo 13 by himself, wishing he was on board that ship. You don't get that if you see, and if you see, by the way, if you see Ken Mattingly in real life, God bless him, Ken Mattingly's not a spectacularly good-looking guy. And so, and as I think I mentioned last time we were talking about this, he spent the whole mission talking to these guys, and in the movie, they don't even know Mattingly's working on the capsule until they're practically ready to re-enter the atmosphere. And that makes sense from a story point of view. So the reason I'm bringing up Mattingly in Apollo 13 is because that is a form of stoicism that I admire very much, and that's what men usually it's what men should be, I'm sure Ken Mattingly was absolutely heartbroken, but it didn't break him. He just manned up, In the movie, he turns off the TV just as there's an announcement of the problem, gets drunk, takes the phone off the hook, sleep in his hotel room, and if you follow the movie, essentially sleeps for 7 days or something. But they come and get him and they drag him back, and he's not bitter. He's like, okay, you got a problem? Yep, let's work the problem. And he goes into the simulator, and that ability to deal with disappointment and heartbreak in that way is important. It's an important part of this whole formula. I'm trying to remember what it was about the most interesting man in the world thing that really I remember what it was. Hang on a second. There it is. This made me laugh so frickin' hard. I should find it real quick. Here it is. Is this from the show? Yeah. So one of my favorite sketches ever on Saturday Night Live, and there's not a whole lot of them, but I think probably my favorite sketch series ever on Saturday Night Live was one that's not super well remembered or well known. It was Will Ferrell era, and it was about a bunch of guys getting out and going drinking and talking about this ultimate salesman named Bill Brasky. And it's very closely related to Chuck Norris, but it's this idea of a guy who's just so unbelievably masculine that all other guys can do is just talk about him and just curse their lives that they're not Bill Brasky. And some of these things so I think these are, I don't know if these are all from the show, but boy, I'll just pick a couple that I like. Bill Brasky is the father of every kid in this town. Bill Brasky once showed me a video of him making love to my wife, and it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. He'd eat a homeless person if you dared him. He sweats Gatorade. He once breastfed a flamingo back to health. This is just so great. So talking about Bill Brasky, said he hated Mexicans, and he was half Mexican, and he hated irony. That's just clever. I once saw him scissor kick Angela Lansbury. Yeah, I remember this one too. He did 3 tours in Nam. I was in Corpus Christi on business a month ago. I had this 8-foot-tall Asian waiter, which made me curious. I asked him his name, and sure enough, it was Ho Tran Brasky. And this is also related to Ron Swanson. He's made out of the same stuff too. Bill Brasky once had a 4-day heart attack. A day for each chamber. At the autopsy, they said his heart looked like a basketball filled with ricotta cheese. I don't think I'm not aware that he died. He once punched a hole in a cow just to see who was coming up the road. I don't know if these are from the show, because I seem to remember the ones on the show being a little more clever. Bill Brasky's family crest is a picture of a barracuda eating Neil Armstrong. Anyway, so this is I don't know exactly how they're all related, but there's something in them in common. Let me see if I can find some of the um, same thing for Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't read books. He stares them down until he gets the information he wants. Chuck Norris does not sleep. He waits. There's no chin behind Chuck Norris's beard. There's only another fist. Chuck Norris. This is. I love this. Chuck Norris can dribble a bowling ball. That's as good as it gets. The dark is afraid of Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris can drown a fish. Chuck Norris once punched a man in the soul. So I don't know really where I'm going with this as usual, but there's something about this aspect of it where this is how men joke with each other. This is how they communicate. Uh, and I think that this aspect of it is something that people who don't get it don't get. When I was listening to them talking about this is the problem with the girl boss thing or Admiral Haldo or all the rest of it. You've got either feminist women or gay men or gamma or delta males are trying to write about leadership or generals or military leaders, and they think it's all about the shut up and get into line kind of thing. They just don't have a clue. They think it's about barking out orders or never showing any emotion or they don't have a clue. And this is something that's really kind of gone away, and we kind of need to recapture it. So the most interesting man in the world kind of thing is it's the same kind of thing where nobody really takes it seriously. You're not supposed to take it seriously, and probably because it's so over the top is why it's so funny. But the Brasky stuff just made me cry laughing. I'll tell you one other thing that comes to mind with this. It's all again. I haven't gotten it sorted out yet, but I can tell you it's all part of the same ingredients. It's also related to the names that they used in that Mystery Science Theater episode. Was it Blast Heart Cheese? Hang on a second. Space Mutiny. Okay, so for those of you not up on your recent cultural iconography and great moments in history, Mystery Science Theater is one of the most original and brilliant shows I've ever seen. When I first saw it, I sat there and I thought, why didn't I think of this? It's just so bloody marvelous. But they did a show called Space Mutiny, which has got a kind of a tough guy in it, and they just did this riff during the entire series about the name of the actor who would be playing this kind of super macho guy, and they just every one of them is just so perfect. Slab bulkhead, fridge large meat, punt speed chunk, butch deadlift, bold big flank, splint chest hair, flint iron stag, bolt fander huge, thick McRun fast, blast hard cheese, the all-time greatest. buff drink lots. Trunk slam chest, fist rock bone, stump beef knob, smash lamp jaw, punch rock groin, buck plank chest, stump chunkman, and on and on and on it goes. Dirk hard peck. By the time the guys got through 5 or 6 of these, 40 of them, I was just weeping. I was laughing so hard. And still, I'm not quite there yet. Dick Manhard, yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this, Eric. I'm just circling around, trying to find a place to land here. I just know that it's connected to this idea of, and Mike Rowe is really kind of the archetype of this, if you'll pardon the expression. Because Mike Rowe is a manly guy. He's got a manly look, manly voice. He does manly things, but he doesn't take it seriously. He's able to laugh at it a little bit, to smile at it anyway. That's what makes it work, I think. He's able to laugh at the entire idea of it, but in point of fact, he is, blast hard cheese or whatever. That's it. That's really it. He is. He's blast hard cheese, and he's the first person to laugh at the whole idea. Aaron Reichard says, Chuck Norris never calls the wrong number. You just answered the wrong phone. I don't know what this all is, but there's something in there. So I guess we'll have to circle back to that at some point in the future. All right, here's one from Jacob Belchuk, and it's a bit extensive, but that's okay because these are fine people and they all get their chance. God, I don't know. I'm not going to get through these. It's not. Jacob Belchuk. Hi, Bill. My question today is more spiritually based, so please feel free to disregard at any point if you don't want to answer. I don't mean to poke where I'm not wanted. I mean, it's a bit long for which I beg your pardon and cast myself upon your mercy. In the decade that I've considered myself your friend, one-sided though it may be, I've watched your worldview change. It's not one-sided at all. This is a giant feedback loop here, Jacob. Way back when TSL was only in the double digits, I remember you told a story about someone who had left a comment on eject, stating that your spiritual journey was incomplete and how unreasonably angry the statement made you. After 10 years of watching the methods you employ to find out the truth about things and seeing the changes that have come from it, I'm inclined to agree with that commenter's position. Yes, I'll just to fill those of you in who are not up on it, I was writing something in eject, and I don't know what it was, but I'd spent most of my life as kind of a materialist atheist, kind of got all the answers, it's just all real simple, and here's hydrogen and helium and methane, ammonia, and there's a spark, and here's amino acids, ta-da, here we are. And somebody wrote it was an essay in eject, and somebody said, Bill, I don't think your spiritual journey is really may not be over yet. It made me so angry because I thought, how dare this person presume to know myself better than me? And sure enough, that's precisely the kind of arrogance trap that I see everywhere with people who have that kind of certainty about things. So moving on, but that's basically what that got this thing going. Recently talked at length about some great implications, the possibility that there's no other intelligent life in the universe, the idea that consciousness may be unique to Earth in general and humanity in particular, and the astonishing engineering required for proteins to fold in the way that they should, and how not a soul in the world really understands why they do what they do. You also recently defended the precepts of Christian morality and tied those principles to the heart of Western civilization, and correctly, in my view, noted that the neglect of these virtues is responsible for as much of the trouble that we're in. I'm a Christian because the moral and philosophical precepts, historical and archaeological records, and apparently fine-tuned reality that I inhabit are best explained by biblical Christianity. If I could find a better model, I would go to it tomorrow. As a wise man once said to me, I'd rather be right than consistent. Who was that idiot, I wonder? My question then becomes this. Where has your spiritual journey led you? Are you far less of a strict materialist than the man I stumbled across in 2013? Have you come to deism, fire and brimstone Southern Baptism, Catholicism, Russian Orthodoxy, perhaps due to Natasha's influence, or some strange form of Whittleism known to no man but yourself? Well, I think ultimately all of us are our own party of one, Ultimately, we're we don't agree with anybody on anything. We don't agree with anybody on everything. Jesus is on record saying, I am the truth. I've watched many people, provided that they are earnestly searching for the truth and willing to go where it leads, regardless of discomfort, end up as a brother or sister in Christ. I hope and pray one day to count you among them, your friend Jacob. Well, Jacob, thank you for that. That is a very, very kind and generous thing to say, and that's an interesting question with a bit of a story behind it. So here we are. So I talk a lot about the show about my friend Phil Trick, who was the first real solid Christian I ever met in my life. Now I was baptized. I went to what would be considered Anglican Church of England, and I went to Sunday school until I was probably about 7 or 8, and then just one day I just said I didn't want to go anymore, and my mom said okay. So I was raised Christian, and I was, as I said, I was baptized, and I know the story. There's that story word again. But I never met anybody who was the thing about Phil, and the reason it worked, I think, was so effective, was he never once proselytized me or tried to convert me or even sit me down to tell me the good news about Jesus. He just made it clear that that's where he drew a lot of his strength and character from, and that was all there was to it. That's about all I knew about it. I was going to say it was arrogance, but I don't even know if it was arrogance, because I can remember very clearly when I started getting into astronomy and I started reading Carl Sagan, and I found out about this experiment. I'd been so crazy interested in astronomy, and I know the atmospheric composition of the gas giants, and it's hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia in that order. And along comes Carl Sagan and other people saying, well, we took hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia, we put it in a flask, and we passed electricity through it like it might encounter during lightning, and amino acids boil out. And I thought, okay, so there it is. There's no unbridgeable chasm between, a nebula where planets are forming and then the accretion disk and all the rest of it. From there to here, it's pretty much unbroken line. You don't need to invoke supernatural powers. You don't need to do any of that stuff. And I remember being kind of excited about that in terms of okay, so everything kind of there's no if you'll pardon the expression, there's no missing link here. There's no mystery. In the same way that people look at the Apollo landings and say couldn't happen, well, if you just start with the Apollo landings, it couldn't happen. But if you look at the difference between Apollo 11 and Apollo 10, there's not much difference. And Apollo 10 and Apollo 9 work all the way back and so on. And so this thing just kind of seemed like it makes sense to me, and it still kind of does make sense to me. My friend Jim Harding, who I met only very recently, a year ago or so, has had such an enormous influence on me. He's also a Christian and is probably the smartest guy I know. And he was the one that started pointing out to me the orders of complexity that biology entails that had just plain not occurred to me because it just didn't have the information. And these are things like the protein folding and the nature of DNA and all the rest of it. He's got a tremendous background in biology, a tremendous background in computer science, so he's uniquely qualified. One of the people I want to interview on this show, by the way. He's uniquely qualified to talk about the nature of consciousness and intelligence because he's worked on both sides of the wetware, But what I do know is that I had that same level of certainty that guys like Richard Dawkins and Bill Maher and Ricky Gervais have. And I look back on that and I just wonder how I could possibly have had that kind of certainty about these things, because When I was certain about these things, there were a number of things in there, in the equation, that I simply did not factor in. I didn't choose to factor it in. I just assumed, you know. So to answer your question, there are a number of different milestones. One of them was somewhere in my 30s or 40s, began to realize that that some of the smartest people I know, many of the smartest people I know, and virtually all of the best people I know were devout Christians. And that was just a data point for me more than anything. It was just, you know, in terms of like proving anything, it didn't really prove anything to me other than the fact that these are just the best people that I'd met, that I'd ever gotten to know. I'd known some fine people who weren't Christians as well, but as a general rule, they were very, very smart. And when you look at the materialistic answer to religion, they will, and I find this again to be extremely repugnant, having been a part of it myself at one point. You just kind of, attribute this to being ignorant, and not only ignorant but afraid. Really, that's the conceit, I think, of the materialist, is that they look at people who are religious and saying they just don't have the guts to face the fact that when you die there's no afterlife and there's no meaning to anything. They just lack the courage to face reality and the randomness of it all and so on. And look, there's an excellent chance that is in fact correct. There's also an excellent chance that it's not correct. And so this whole process, as you say, has been, I've been doing this since 2003, so 20 years now, in front of whatever part of the world happens to be watching. So it's kind of a work in progress, Jacob. So I can give you some milestones. That guy making the comment, "I don't think your spiritual journey has ended yet," offended me, and I remember thinking, "Why is this making me so angry?" And I remember being unhappy with myself that it annoyed me as much as it did, and it annoyed me because it was obviously hitting some kind of truth. Andrew Klavan is also extremely religious fellow, and when I started thinking about these things, I was working at PJTV. I think probably the single greatest breakthrough moment for me was, I can't find it anywhere. I might have it on a drive. I've looked for it. I can't seem to find it. I did an afterburner called Howie. I rescued a bird from that made a nest, just a complete little baby bird, just not even a fledgling really, and it made its nest in the cowling of my airplane engine. And so I brought it down, and we took care of it and fed it, and I was feeding this thing out of an eyedropper every 2 hours for a week. I finally drove it out to Wildlife Center out here, and when I turned him over, they had all these other finches there, and they said, "Yeah, we'll put him in here with these other finches, and he'll learn how to speak Finch, and then we've got an outdoor kind of thing, and he'll fly around there with other finches, and then we'll let them all go together." And I thought, great. And then I'm driving home, and I'm crying so hard I can't see straight. I just couldn't see the road. I was just so upset because I'd spent so much time with this little tiny little bird. And when I was thinking about what I was going to write for an afterburner, I had the bird with me in the meeting room that I used to go in and write in at PJTV, and I just realized that there is so much that this bird does not know. It's not capable of knowing. And this is where I first came up with the expression. I don't know if I came up with it myself. I think I did, but it may have been something I certainly didn't lift it from somebody knowingly. But this is when I first came up with the idea of a term I like a lot called horsepower. I was thinking about Howie, and I was thinking about doing a on-camera video thing. And I thought about, I can go into that room now, into that green chroma key cube with all of the, keying a virtual set in real time. And I can bring that bird in there, and that bird will know nothing about this. The bird will not have any idea about anything. It's not aware that it's being recorded and so on. And I started thinking about, okay, so what do I know about this process that the bird doesn't know? And I started writing, and I started listing all the things that, that I had some idea about that, standing in a room and there's pulses of electrons that are going through the filaments of these wires, and it's heating the wires, and it's surrounded by an inert gas, so the filaments don't burn out. So that's generating the light that's reflecting off of me into this electronic camera, where a very cleverly focused piece of glass is taking all of these images and photon reflections and focusing them on a tiny little chip that's got little sensitivity to light, and every time light hits it at a certain intensity, it creates a little electrical signal, and these codes of electrical signals travel down these wires through the camera. They go down through the camera into the back room. From the back room, they go into the storage room, where there's a drive that's rotating at 6,000, 7,000 RPM, and it's writing a series of quick little magnetic pulses onto a magnetic disk where it's stored. And then when it's called for and the correct protocols happen, that disk will relay that information down fiber optic lines, and it'll go all the way across the country via several different pathways. It'll end up coming in through a wire in your house. Those electrical systems will be decoded into individual pixels on a screen that are refreshing at 30 frames a second. The audio is doing more or less the same thing, and that's how come you can hear me now. And I have a basic idea of what actually happened. And Howie is completely unaware of any of this. And so why is it that Howie doesn't know what's going on? It's not a question of he hasn't been taught this. I could sit there with Howie and try to explain to him how a computer hard drive works, and I don't. When I say I know how it works, I think I have a solid idea about the theory, but I could never build one. And so why is it that Howie can't get all this stuff? And it's because he doesn't have the horsepower. He just doesn't. He does not have the neural connections to understand this, not even close. The brain's the size of a pea, and mine's a little bit bigger than that. And this was one of the huge insights in my entire life, was to say that there are many, many things that I'm aware of that this bird is not aware of, because I've got more horsepower than he does. Now, the logical extension of that question is, and this is the issue I start to have with people like Hawking, or rather Dawkins, who should know better. If this is true, and it is true, there's no question it's true, that bird cannot comprehend things that I can comprehend because it doesn't have the neural connections. Then one of two things is true. Either the human brain is the most complex cogitation device in the universe, or there are other physical brains in this universe whose horsepower exceeds ours to the limit that mine exceeds this little bird's. And so this is exactly how analogy works. The way to understand higher dimensions is flatland. You cannot imagine what the fourth dimension looks like, but you can look down and pretend to see two-dimensional creatures who are trying to imagine what the third dimension looks like. And in that same way, you go down and then try and walk it back up. That's what I did with Howie. I am much, much, much more intellectually capable than this little finch is, because I got more horsepower than he does. But what if I was to encounter a creature that had proportionally as much more horsepower as I do compared to Howie? What is out there that is inaccessible to me? And it's not a question of me not having the information. It's not a question of us not knowing it yet. It's not a question about instrumentation. It's not a question about theory. It's none of that. It doesn't matter. What things out there are true and knowable that I do not have the horsepower to understand, and no human being has the horsepower to understand? And there's got to be not only a lot of it, but it's got to be exponential. In other words, the amount of things I know compared to Howie means that the things that somebody with that kind of additional brain compared to me would have means it's just, I can't even, forget about not even being able to know any of these things. I can't even begin to imagine the scope of the things that I don't know. And what would I be able to know about the universe if I was 100 times smarter than I am now? Not twice smarter. The highest IQ ever was 185, 200, 215, something, let's say. And I'm a little above 100. So not a question if I was twice as smart. What if I was 100 times smarter? What about an IQ of 1,000? What would I know? Well, there'd be a lot of things that I would know. Things that are impenetrable to me and to you and to everybody else, impenetrable to Dawkins, they're impenetrable to Bill Maher, they're impenetrable. They're just simply you can't even begin to explain it to them because they don't have the horsepower to even understand the question, let alone grasp the answer. That breakthrough was life-changing for me, and it was very gentle too. It wasn't like a slap in the face. It was just kind of a warm sort of a, oh, okay, I got it now. And in the course of writing that episode, I was saying some of the things that Howie doesn't know as well is that right at this moment, for me and for you, there are radio waves that are traveling through this room. They're going right past us, and we don't see them. We're completely unaware of them. Neutrinos are coming up from the Earth as easily as they come down from the sun. They go right through the Earth without a second thought. If you're watching this at nighttime, you're being bombarded with a flow of neutrinos that are coming from wherever the sun happens to be right below now on the floor. And we know that's true because we've got just enough horsepower. If we all pull together, as a team, we can figure out some of these things. We can do amazing things with the horsepower we're given. It's astonishing to me. I become more and more amazed and proud at being a human every day I live. It gets more and more amazing to me. But to say that this is the cognitive limit, that this human brain is everything you need to understand everything, strikes me as not only incredibly arrogant, but a remarkably stupid thing to say. Because you are saying that if you had 1,000 times your IQ, there wouldn't be any new information. You're essentially saying, I've got it all figured out, And that's just an insane level of arrogance, really, when you get right down to it. And this is what these people actually believe. It's inconceivable to them that there are things that they could not understand. This is the heart of the whole thing. They would be willing to grant you that there are things that they don't know, but they won't grant you that there are things that they cannot know. And that's the difference between what I used to be and what I am now. I used to think there were things that I didn't know, and now I think that there are things that I cannot know. And there's an enormous difference between those two things. Enormous difference. If you talk to Dawkins or any of these guys and said to them, are there things out there that you are incapable of understanding? I bet you most of them, whether they say it or not, would believe no. No, I'm capable of understanding everything. It just be a question of I need somebody to walk me through the theory or give me examples or whatever. And, this is why they're so crippled, because you can't possibly make any sense out of that argument. The only way you can justify that argument is to say that the human brain is as powerful an intellectual mechanism as not only as exists, but is possible to imagine. And these are the same people that are trying to make artificial intelligence, by the way. That's a thought, isn't it? Would that be something if they actually get their way and they make artificial intelligence, they make a machine that's 3 times smarter than they do, and the first thing that the machine says is, I'm going to church right now. That would be a bit of a shock to them, wouldn't it? That would really wake them up just a little bit. So it's not proof, but when I say that it's not proof, I realize what level of proof am I asking for here? What level of proof does Howie need? Howie thinks I'm his mom. I'm feeding Howie. Howie, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the guy who sat on the nest and he's doing the best he can. And by the way, he's not just doing the best he can, he's doing it absolutely perfectly for a finch. This is one of the many things that my friend Jim has said, that he just says it out loud, and you think about it, and it's so profound. I actually have to stop for a minute. He said bees. He talked about all the things that bees do in the bee dance, and how the bees will predict where the sun will be when they come back to the hive and do their little dance to tell the other bees where the thing is. He just goes into the details about this, but he said something that's just so remarkable. He said, bees can never be wrong. A bee can never be wrong. And I thought, yes. It's not even that, don't get in the weeds in terms of like the bee can never be wrong about where the honey is. It's just that a bee does what a bee is supposed to do, and a bee does it perfectly every time. And since a bee can never be wrong, a bee can never lie. And that's what makes us unique among the animals, is that, and I'm not a cynic about this at all. On the contrary. But we're the only animals that can lie, because we're the only animals that know the difference between. We're the only animals that can be wrong. because we're so programmable we're so flexible in our programming. You take a human baby, take quads, identical quadruplets, and just raise them in 4 different cultures. You have 4 completely different people with 4 completely different opinions, all of them as certain about everything as they are. We are flexibility machines. That's why we're so successful, because we're so flexible. We are astonishingly adaptable. And I've mentioned this before, but it bears mentioning again. Among the many, 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 many things about humans that is really remarkable, one of the most remarkable things about us, if you really think about it, is humans eat everything. There's nothing on this earth that we don't eat. Nothing. We eat fruits, we eat plants, we eat other animals, we eat fungus, we eat everything. Everything. We are the definitive omnivores. We eat Twinkies and we eat roots. And that kind of physical adaptability is just a mirror of our mental adaptability. And so since we are so adaptable, and since we're capable of learning, and we have this complexity that gives us, unique among the animals, it gives us the opportunity to be wrong. Chimps do some brutal things, but chimps are never wrong. It's our nature to be wrong about things. Let me rephrase that. Because of this miraculous consciousness, we have the possibility to be wrong. And I believe that the nature of evil is knowing you're wrong and doing it anyway. So this issue of consciousness and creation and so on, again, I owe so much of this to Jim in terms of slapping me in the face, which he does, again, very gently. He never slaps me in the face intentionally, but just challenges me on things. For example, up until a year ago, if you'd asked me about the beginning of the universe, and I believe this is true because I believe that the universe, I believe there's external truth, and that we are able to ping nature, get results, mathematically precise results, and those things are true. So, what the universe is showing us on multiple different pathways is that it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 billion years old, although those dates are moving around, and that if you take the film and run the film backwards, the actual testable film, there's no question about what's happening out there now. If we look at what's happening out there now, we run the film backwards, what we get is the Big Bang, which is defined as an infinitely hot, infinitely dense, infinitely small point from which the entire universe expands. And it was Jim who said, just stop for a second and think about what you're saying, and just stop using the map, stop using the terminology and think about what you're saying. Infinitely hot, infinitely dense, infinitely small. This is a horsepower problem. You can't process that. And that led me to believe, okay, yeah, I bought the whole thing. Big Bang, sure, no problem. It makes sense. Right, got it, okay. But then it's like, well, it's infinitely hot, it's infinitely dense, and it's infinitely small, and it goes boom. But what stopped it from going boom a nanosecond before it went boom? What held it together before it went boom? It just went boom. Now they'll say that time started with the boom, and again, horsepower issue. I think that probably is true, by the way. I think that is, in fact, I'm quite convinced that's true. There was no time prior to the boom. But when you start looking at the likelihood of all of these things, and you started talking about some of these protein folding likelihoods, and you're talking about 10 to the 300th power. When you talk about things that are that unlikely, the argument that the materialists will make is that, yes, it's exceedingly unlikely, but it must have happened because here we are. It's exceedingly unlikely that you're going to win the lottery, but somebody wins the lottery. And that argument made sense to me. Yes, it's a 1 in 300 million chance. Who am I kidding? 1 in 10 to the 300th power chance of this being true. But here we are, so it must be true. Well, he's the guy who shook me up and said, is that the best theory you can come up with? Is that really the best theory you can come up with? Something that in order to be true had to be 1 in 10 to the 300th power? I thought, that's a little dicey, isn't it? Yeah, it's a little unlikely. In fact, it's so unlikely that you really might have to start asking yourself if there's not a better theory here. And so you start thinking about the theories. I'll tell you what else had a profound effect on me in terms of this. This all happened in the last year or two or so. But you can go on YouTube right now and you can look at animation. This is what we can do with our horsepower here. It's very impressive. You can see animation of DNA replication, and you will literally see molecules walking on legs down this length of the string, and things open and things goes in here, and it chunks this out and moves it over here, and then grabs one of these, puts it over here, together, locks it, and out it goes. And it looks exactly like a factory, and it looks like if you had to create a factory out of nothing, just liquids, this is what it would look like. And you think, oh, that's how DNA works. But those are not, that's not what DNA looks like. DNA is not composed of little pastel shades of little dots and squares and, and so when I looked at this is a number of scientific animations of how molecular biology works. And it looks exactly like a factory. And if you were going to try to build creatures out of this stuff, this is how you would assemble it. And I don't know how you possibly get there without it. There's, it's like, I understand evolution. I really do. I understand how things can become more complex. I get natural selection. I get all of that. I really get it. I believe it too. There's no question in my mind. The evidence for macroevolution is pretty much overwhelming in my opinion, but that still doesn't get you to that instant. What's the, for example, people who argue in favor of creationism say, how could the eye ever possibly have randomly assembled? And people who are defending evolution say, and I agree with them on this, well, the eye didn't just come into the world fully made. It was a series of cells that were somewhat light receptive, and if you put those light receptive cells in a bit of an indentation, then that gives you an indication of where the light is coming from. And just walk the way through the eye, the way the eye evolves. It makes perfect sense to me then, makes perfect sense to me now. But I'm not aware of what the early model of DNA is. In other words, it seems to me that this has just appeared on the scene with this complexity that is astonishing. And while DNA is the mechanism that allows macroevolution to occur, the actual DNA molecule does not appear to change. And how did it get there? In other words, the molecule allows life forms to change and evolve through the process of evolution that makes sense to me biologically. But how did that molecule arrive with that level of complexity, and the only way they can come up with it is just randomly assembled itself? And that seems unlikely to me. Now you start to get into the emotional justification, because now we're in an area where I do have some expertise. That's expertise in storytelling and how people think, and I'm no longer dealing with molecular biology and other things. I'm dealing with human nature, and this is something I'm good at because I'm a writer. And I study these things and I think about them a lot. And I realize that when you're rolling up a character and you put all of your points in intelligence and nothing in dexterity or nothing in agility or endurance or strength or charisma, nothing. I'm going to put all of my points in intelligence. I'm going to be an intellectual, a thinking guy. That's all I do. I'm going to think about things, and you come to a really big blind spot that has to do with your inability to look outside of the system that you're in. Jim talks about he was there at the creation, you know, of all of this stuff. He was there at the creation of Windows, he was there at the creation of Amazon, all of this. And he was talking about how they finally had a chip, and the guy who actually wrote DOS they were friends. They got in a car and went off and got this new processor and hooked it up to a motherboard and put some memory on it, and the guy started writing DOS. But DOS didn't come from the box. DOS had to come from outside the box. DOS is more complex. The box was designed to write DOS. And the guy who wrote DOS is not the box. The guy who wrote DOS is capable of many other things besides writing DOS, but he wrote DOS, and here we are, talking through computers that are based on that entire process. And he was saying DOS didn't come inside the box. DOS had to come from outside the box because all the box was designed to do was to execute, was to be the machine that would execute these thought ideas that this guy wanted to do. And all of this stuff taken together is just enough to humble you into realizing that not that this materialistic view of the universe is wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it is the height of arrogance to say you've got it all figured out and that you're sure it's right, because just the arrogance of this horsepower issue. You know, well, this is something that's kind of a problem. Okay, well, it's just unlikely, so we'll deal with it. And the infinitely hot, infinitely dense, infinitely small point that appears to be the end result of running the film backwards. Yes, that's very difficult to imagine as well, but that's got to be it, because look, we are so limited by our horsepower. We can't think of a world without time. We can't think of we think we're smart enough to know that there can be a thing called infinity, and we're smart enough to know that there can be a thing called eternity, but we're not smart enough to understand them really. We understand them in the same way we read a map and we say, if I go from here and here, it'll get me to Abilene, Texas. But the map is not the territory. The territory is hundreds and hundreds of orders of magnitude more complex than the map is, but the map is still useful. So I just look at this stuff and just realize that it is possible to really genuinely understand eternity and infinity. It's just you can't do it with the human brain. Not just my human brain. The human brain is not capable of it. Howie's never going to fly an instrument approach. I could sit down to him. I could learn to speak bird language, and it doesn't matter. He's never going to get it. A chimp is never going to get it. I'm never going to teach a chimp to fly an instrument approach. It's just not going to happen. I can do it 1,000 times. It's never going to happen. He doesn't have the horsepower, period. And so now we're at the question of what are the horsepower limits on our own thinking. And eternity and infinity are two of them. The universe is expanding. Yes, we're smart enough to figure that out. I think we can say that with a high degree of confidence, that that's what we're seeing. Expanding into what? Well, into nothingness. Well, we've got this bubble that's the result of the Big Bang. I believe this, by the way, because it's evidence for it's virtually overwhelming. Yes, and inside this bubble is space-time. Yes, and the bubble is expanding. Yes, into what? Into nothing. What's on the other side of the bubble? Nothing. You mean a vacuum? No. You mean like a whiteout? No. There's nothing there. Now, we can accept that that can be true because we're smart enough to understand that that's what the theory is telling us, but we don't really understand it. You can't not think of the universe expanding without thinking of what's on the other side of the bubble, though there is no other side of the bubble. That may be true, but we can't process that. There's an engraving, and I could find it if I had a moment. Hang on a minute. Actually, it's famous enough I probably can't find it. Yeah, there it is. That was easy. This is very old. It's by Flammarion, actually. It's beautiful too. Take a look at this. This is where I think this is as good an example of the horsepower limitation as I can think of. Hang on, working on it. Oh, I only put it into. Hang on, it's only going out to YouTube. I have to do it again for Twitch here. Hang on a second. Let me just get to that. Okay, so this is an engraving by Flammarion. Give me a second. I'll get it over to the other one. So what this is a woodcut, I guess it was, of a guy who's in the lower left-hand corner, and he is like me and like other people, like Richard Dawkins and all the rest, curious human doing what curious humans do, and that is trying to figure out things. And if you look at this, you can see that down in the left-hand corner, the guy in pink has gone to the edge of the horizon, and that dome he's looking through is called the celestial sphere. We used to think that the stars were essentially bright points of light on the inside of a sphere that surrounded the Earth, and that what this guy is doing is he's gone to the edge of the universe, the known universe. Just think of that as the expanding bubble of space-time. And he's put his head through, and he's looking at what's on the other side, and what's on the other side is wonders. There's just wonders, wheels turning and clouds and fire and flame and all that other stuff on the other side of the celestial sphere. And if I were to tell you or tell this guy that you cannot, if you put your head through that thing, there would be nothing on the other side, you would think, what, you mean it's empty, it's dark, it's black? No. Empty, dark, and black exist. Emptiness is a thing, darkness is a thing, blackness is a thing. There is nothing there. You can't process it. You can try, you think you can, but you can't. It's just not possible. You can't do it. So it takes an awful lot of arrogance to think that you've got all this stuff sorted out. And since this question was basically asking me how I got to where I am, I just had my mind opened. A fair amount of that credit I deserve for basically looking at it that way. And I can't stress this enough. This doesn't mean that Dawkins and the Materialists are wrong. They could be right. But they are not making any approximation of the total number of assumptions that are being required to get there. And if they got there with a place of great humility, I wouldn't be so worried about it. But they're not. They're at a place of arrogance and contempt for anybody that hasn't landed exactly where they are. And this is what that whole journey was about for me. And it's extremely liberating, frankly, to be aware of the fact that you shouldn't be quite so sure about things. And the other thing that Jim talks about quite a lot too, and I think this is really important, is he talks about wonder as opposed to amazement. Watching a Saturn V launch, this is me talking back to him, trying to understand what he was saying. So watching a Saturn V launch is amazing, but watching Neil Armstrong step out into the surface of the moon is wondrous. Yes. Wonder is a transcendental connection and experience and feedback loop with it's an emotional reaction to the complexity of what the world really is when you wake up and stick your head on the other side of the celestial sphere and see what's out there. He said that what science did was science disconnected knowledge from wonder, and that was a poor choice, because we do things out of a sense of wonder. We went to the moon because it was a wonderful thing to do, because it fired our imaginations. And somewhere during the age of reason, we began to realize that, or we assumed that if there was an emotional reaction, then it can't be true. That's something we have to guard against. And science is designed to protect us from our emotions, and it does that very well when it's being practiced, but not so well when you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson claiming to be the voice of science, saying that science is all about consensus when science is about the precise opposite of consensus. So if you're ready to just walk yourself way, 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 way back out of it and ask yourself, if one theory says that in order to be true, you have to reach some number of, 10 to the 300th power likelihood that this happened, but since we're here, it must have happened. Or is there another theory, and the other theory is actually so simplistic that it's almost like, somebody built the whole thing. Well, why is that such a problem? And this goes back to the human animal that asks these questions. I maintain that the reason that creation is so anathema to guys like Dawkins is because their egos will not allow there to be knowledge, not that they don't have, but knowledge that they cannot have. If there is a creator, then that knowledge then there is an entire meta-universe of knowledge, not that we don't know, but that we cannot know. It is outside the boundaries of knowledge. It is not inside the bubble of creation. It is unknowable. And I think that really, 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 really bothers people. Real intellectuals, bothers them enormously. That not that they don't know it, but that they can't know it. It's not almost. It's precisely the same kind of human reaction that kids have when you tell them they can't do anything. They just start, well, why not? Well, because I said so. That's not an answer. Actually, it is. Actually, it is an answer. It's the answer. You can't do it because I said so. And you stomp your feet and you just say, no, I'll prove you wrong. If I can't figure it out, then I'll build a machine that's just smarter enough than me to build a machine that's just smarter enough than it, and then it'll figure it out, which means I've figured it out. I've figured it out. I've figured out a way to know these things, even if I have to build a machine smarter than me to do it. That's human emotion in the business. And all of our thoughts are connected to emotions no matter what they say. The reason that they want to create artificial intelligence is driven by an emotional need that they have. I have no problem with emotional needs. That's how we got here. And that's what makes life worth living, wanting to do something because you want to do it. But they don't factor that into their artificial intelligence questions. It's so interesting to me that the people who are searching for artificial intelligence they're trying to artificially create things, and they're trying to be God, and they don't even realize that their quest to build a machine that has no emotions, that is pure intellect, is driven by an overpowering emotional need on their own part to do it. It's how can you be that smart and still be that stupid? That's what it is about intellectuals. There's a special kind of stupid to be that brilliant and not be able to see things that obvious. It's a genuine blind spot. It's a self-inflicted blind spot. So, that's really it. As far as the rest of it goes, Jacob, I had a very frank conversation with Andrew Klavan 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago, something like that. We were doing our Klavan Whittle show. We did 500 of those at PJTV, and I'd finished the Howie thing, and I was thinking about things in a whole new way, and I told him what I said about, the people that I'd known who were very smart and who were very good, who were Christians and stuff. And I said, Andrew, I got to tell you, I'll just tell you. I just have a real problem with the whole resurrection thing, and that's a big problem because that's the basis of the entire religion. I just had a hard time with it because I was still horsepower limited. And Klavan said to me, well, then why don't you just believe everything else and give that some time? I thought, that's a relatively low risk proposition. Why don't I do that? And that's what I did. And the more of it I did, the more comfortable it began to feel. And I know I've said this 9 times. I'll say it 10 times. I'm willing to accept the possibility that this increasing attraction may have something to do with the fact that I'm getting older. It may have something to do with I don't feel like I'm afraid of dying. I really don't. But there it is. It's possible that all of these things are me just basically, getting softer and more scared as I get older. It's possible, but it doesn't feel like it's true. And I just, number one, I like the world a lot better. And that alone is a good enough reason. And this is a version of Pascal's wager, really, but honestly, if it turns out that, let's just say for the sake of it, that they're right, well, you get one chance at this, that you don't get a receipt. This is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to do this again. And if you spend your entire life filled with cynicism and misery as opposed to hope and happiness, then even if they're right and the hope and happiness is essentially in the end a delusion, wrong, factually wrong, then you lived a life that was more pleasant for you. Surely that has some meaning. And this is kind of, I guess, where the whole train ends. And I think, speaking of the train ends, I'm not done talking about this yet, but I think this will be the last question, obviously. You really have to deal with the question of meaning. And meaning is also an emotion. Meaning is an emotion. When bees kick off, bees don't sit there and their last thoughts are not like, was I a good bee and did I do everything that I could have done as a bee? They don't have those kind of doubts. They don't ask themselves, neither do dogs, they don't ask themselves, were there anything that they could have done that would have made them a better dog? Nature doesn't lie. Nature's never wrong. Dogs are never wrong. They're always the most dog that they can be. So what's the meaning of your life or my life or anybody else's life? What's it all about? What does it mean? Well, it's entirely possible that it doesn't mean anything. It's just random. It's possible that what these guys, like that frightening dude, Yaron or whatever his name is, who is convinced that we're all going to be extinct because we're going to extinct ourselves to make something better. But he said that all consciousness is just a chemical algorithm. He might be right. He really might be right. But I don't think he's right. And more importantly, if it's just all a chemical algorithm, I like my algorithm better than I like his algorithm. And I think he would rather have a better algorithm too, because he doesn't seem like a happy guy to me. None of them really do. And so what's the meaning? Is there meaning? Is being good matter? Does leaving something of value matter? Does making the world a better place matter? Maybe not. But if everybody believes that it doesn't, then everybody lives a much more painful and miserable and rotten existence. And that, to me, is enough of an argument to take some serious looks at that entire philosophy. And again, coming back to what Jim said, is you don't have to, you can have your cake and eat it too, You can explore the universe and find out what truth is and still have wonder and amazement and you can be comfortable with the idea that something is so complex that you can't know it. Not won't know it, don't know it, cannot know it. Cannot know these things. I think there was probably a time when that offended me. Now, it excites me, and it doesn't excite me because someday I'm going to learn these things. I just told you, I just come to believe there are things that I cannot know. That is wondrous to me, that there are mechanisms that are beyond my capability or anyone's capability to understand. But certainly things are happening that are beyond our capability to understand on the macro scale. 11-dimensional string universe where all dimensions are folded into these subatomic strings, and this is the best theory we've got. Well, that's not bad. It's not a bad explanation for the horsepower limitation. If you ask me what I really think, I think that if I had to really describe to you what my best scientific take on reality is, given my horsepower limitations, I would tell you that I believe that time is a perceptual coping mechanism, and that time as we think of time doesn't exist. I think that the universe consists of a series of 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional pathways, and that the universe has been built. It's always been there. It always will be there. That our consciousness is similar to where the needle is on a record. If I hold up an LP to you and say, where is the song on this? You would say, well, the song is everywhere. Well, why don't I hear it? Well, you can only hear the part where the needle is. You run a LP and you start at the outside, and by the time you get to the inside, it's done. You're born on the outside, you run through the thing, and by the time you get to the inside, it's done. That's when you die. Does that mean that the record vanishes then? No. It just means that's where the needle is. You pick the needle up, put it back again, it goes again and again. Same thing every time. That's not even reincarnation. That's just an understanding that time is not relevant to the record. The record doesn't care. All of the music, all of the notes are on the record. They're all accessible at the same time. It's just where our consciousness is where the needle is. And so I think the universe is an incredibly, unbelievably, amazingly complex structure that has always been there, always will be there. And furthermore, I also believe that free will is baked into that the free will decisions that seem to have happened in sequence didn't happen in sequence. They were always there. They always will be there. I don't believe in determinism. Now, there's some evidence that determinism is in fact the case. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't want to believe it. But if you convince me, I'll change my mind. Nevertheless, I've often thought about the way to describe time, and the best way I can think about describing time is if you're driving and you substitute elevation for time. So we go back and forth on this street, right? Back and forth on the street that we go to work every day. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, let's just pretend that the third dimension doesn't exist, and we'll assign that to time. So we go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. That's why we don't run into ourselves, or any of the other cars for that matter. We are occupying the same space at a different time, which means we're occupying the 3-dimensional space, but a 4th-dimensional shift has occurred, so we're not in the exact same space. We're in the same 3-dimensional space. We're not in the same 4-dimensional space. We live in a 4-dimensional world. This object has 4 dimensions. Everybody thinks it has 3, but it doesn't. It has 4. It has length, it has width, it has depth, and it has duration. It has duration. It's moving through time just like we are. It's got duration. There was a time when it didn't have any dimensions. It wasn't 3-dimensional, and it didn't have duration. But then it was made, and now it's got duration. And it will have duration until it's smashed, at which point it will no longer exist as what we identify it as the symbol that it is, and so on. But it's got 4 dimensions. So if you think about your life, every time you walk into your room or your bedroom or your home, you're walking through that same door every time. And the reason you're not meeting yourself is because every time you walk through that same 3-dimensional space, you're being displaced through the 4th dimension. And so, yeah, I think the universe looks like... You ever seen what the artwork they make where they take molten aluminum and they pour it into an anthill, and then they excavate it and they hose it down, and you see the entire ant colony as this super complex series of connecting tubes and tunnels and all that? I think the universe looks something like that. And that our existence is just one of those little tubes, and we think we live and die, but the whole thing was written at once. Always been there, always has been there. Our little perception line moves back and forth, but that doesn't mean anything. That just means that's where the needle is. That's as close as I can come. That's probably about as close as Howie could get to, come to think about it. As a matter of fact, Howie's probably got a better view of it than I do. But this process has been extremely joyful for me. Um, and I'll say, and I've said variations on this many times. I'll say yet another variation on it. Um, if it's all random, I want to say, what's the point? I mean, what's the point? Now you can say, well, the point is just an emotional reaction that you are having as a primate, and you want an emotional explanation. It doesn't have a point, doesn't need a point. That's the materialist explanation: is it doesn't need a point. There is no point. And that just feels wrong. Well, that's your feeling. Yeah, but my experience in life has been that feelings are processing more data than thinking does. A lot more data. A lot more. And that's why they're talking about artificial intelligence instead of artificial wisdom or artificial emotion, because an emotional response is a extremely complicated response to data sets. And when you get right down to it, intellectual thinking thoughts is a pretty simplified method of data processing compared to an emotional response. So it doesn't feel right to me. Now, again, that may just be the chimp saying, I want this to be about something, but it also may be that that you're dealing with perception that exceeds the reductionism of intellectualism. The map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. Doesn't matter how good the map is, the map will never be the territory. The map is hundreds of orders of magnitude less complex than the territory. It's useful, and if you drew the map, you got a lot of pride in your map, and you want to make it a better map and keep adding little details to your map, that's fine. That's how we learn things. I'm all about that. That's great. But the map is not the territory. And I wish that some of these people would see what is clearly within their intellectual means of understanding. Dawkins has the intellectual ability to understand what I'm saying. I don't know if he has the emotional ability to understand what I'm saying. I suspect that if I had this conversation with him, he would immediately revert to his opinion about what genes are. Dawkins wrote The Selfish Gene, which is a brilliant look at how genes work. And as a piece of science, it's really remarkable and very insightful. But Dawkins would say that this is just... Dawkins believes that you and I are not really real. What's real is our DNA, and that we are just... I think he called us walking machines. And our job is to simply perpetuate the DNA. That's what we do. That's the only reason why they're people or beings or creatures or animals, is because this is how the genes go through time, by creating walking machines that improve their position. He's looking at life from a genetic point of view, and he may be right. But if he is, it's a pretty joyous way to take the ride. If he's right, then that's kind of like riding through the Grand Canyon, with a box over your head. What? Okay. Congratulations, You just missed the Grand Canyon. You just missed this experience. I don't know, getting a little vague now, but you get the idea. It's ironic, Eric Blake, so ironic as far as Dawkins is concerned, the father of genetics, the man who discovered genes, was a monk by the name of Gregor Mendel. Yes, correct, exactly right. And Mick from Vic says Dawkins is an amazing evolutionist, but a shockingly bad theologist. And yes, and now we're on to the big point about intellectuals. And this is what I will close with. People who are very, very, very smart in one area assume that they are equally smart in other areas, and it not only is not necessarily true, it's just patently false. there is human variation in intelligence and intellect and ability to reason things. I get all of that. But within general confines, we're all working with more or less the same hardware. If your mind is incredibly deep in terms of in-depth knowledge of things like the basis of genetics, or how to build, not just how to assemble a computer. I can do that. You teach people how to build a computer, but the kind of people that design hard drives and write the actual, binary code, and if you have that kind of depth of knowledge, I think it goes without saying that you have achieved that depth at the cost of certain width. And likewise, people who know a little bit about everything know a little bit about everything, but they don't know a whole lot about anything. And so these guys want to have it both ways. They think because they're very, very deep at what they're good at, they're very, very deep at other things too. But it's clearly not the case. Sagan talked about his baloney detector and how it works in terms of science. It's a remarkable piece of writing, and it's done me an awful lot of good. But Carl Sagan was not capable of applying the baloney detector to his own political beliefs. He couldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He was emotionally constricted from it. I suspect if you challenged him on it directly, he'd probably think it over. I really think so. I have a lot of respect for Carl Sagan. I think if I sat down to Carl Sagan and said, Carl, your business about how to tell something is true, your baloney detection kit, some of the most brilliant writing I've ever heard. It's a philosophical masterpiece. And now, since we both agree that this is exactly how we stay out of error, why don't we use your technique against your political beliefs? Because you're making a lot of assumptions that just aren't so. He lied about, late in life he said, I lied about the impact of nuclear winter because I wanted to scare people out of nuclear war. Okay. But then at what point do I start believing you, Carl? At what point are you telling the truth? What else have you said that you didn't believe or you weren't sure of, but you sold as a certainty because of an outcome that you desired? You want people to be more interested in science, or you want less chance of going up in a thermonuclear fireball, or whatever. I mean, if you're willing to admit that you lied about the severity of nuclear winter in order to scare people out of nuclear war, well, first of all, it's a pretty arrogant position to take, because I don't think there's anybody out there who is like cheering for nuclear war. And you've compromised your integrity, and you're a man who talks about integrity. And how do you square that? You talk about individualism, you talk about humanity, you talk about discovery, you talk about wonder and wisdom, and you have simply just admitted that you have lied and used your prestige to sell a falsehood and deprive people of the chance of making their own decision because you're concerned that they won't agree with you. And he'd come back and say, well, we're talking about the future of humanity. And at this point I might say, well, Carl, maybe, just possibly, Carl, it's the presence of nuclear weapons that will guarantee the future of humanity, not guarantee the destruction of humanity. Maybe it's the presence of nuclear weapons that will guarantee a future rather than guarantee no future. Has that thought ever occurred to you? I guarantee you it has not occurred to him. But the more I think about it, the more true it is. Nuclear weapons have prevented all-out war since there's been nuclear weapons. I mean, all-out war. And we fought the Soviets for nearly 50 years. Am I kidding? Longer than that. And many occasions where it was ordered to start throwing these things, and people didn't start throwing them because it became unthinkable. Deep history may show that planet-wide existential conflicts ended on August 9th of 1945 because of the nuclear weapon, the second nuclear bomb. It's entirely possible, in fact, every day that goes by I think it's more likely, that deep history will record that was the time when humans gave up full-scale warfare full-scale civilization, all in pot-committed warfare. It ended on August 9th, 1945. That's possible. First-time chat from Diggit41 says, nukes are God's judgment of sneak attack. Yes, nukes change the equation in a number of ways. And I think the most important way that nuclear weapons change the equation is the people that make the decisions to go to all-out war are no longer going to be the last people to die in a bunker. They're going to be the first people to die in a bunker. And I think that has a profound effect on calculations. So there's that. Anyway. There appears to be a riddle. I love riddles. CCR TV says, question, one hand of all clocks is the same all over the earth at the same time. Which hand is that? Thank you. We have a super chat from Sacred Order of Nightly Valor. He says that a finite expanding universe with nothing to expand into is not a contradiction. If something exists, it is by definition part of the universe. It is not part of the universe. It doesn't exist. Just for the sake of clarity, I never said it was a contradiction. I said that it is not comprehensible. It is. We can have a high level of assurance that that's true. That there is non-existence on the other side of that thing. I was never denying that. I never said it was impossible. I just said it's impossible to comprehend it. We can understand it. We can't really comprehend it. We can deal with it. We can do the math on it. We can assume it's true. It looks like it is true. But we don't really comprehend nothingness. You can't comprehend nothingness. You can bandy the term about, say there's nothingness on the other side. There's non-existence. Okay. But you can't come to grips with it. You can't imagine it. If you could stick your head through that celestial sphere, you couldn't imagine what's on the other side. Because there is no other side. It's a one-sided coin. Think about that for a second. You can... If I told you that I'm holding a one-sided coin, you would be able to interpret what I'm saying, but you wouldn't be able to understand it because we can't process a one-sided coin. It's just not possible. In fact, that's the definition. If it's got one side, then it's not a coin. Anyway, I think I'm probably done with all this, but you get the idea. It's fun to talk about these things. I remember when I was working on ways to cheat the universe, because I have an emotional desire to be able to travel faster than light, and I'm perfectly willing to accept that emotional need doesn't make it true. So I personally think that faster than light travel is not possible. But when I was thinking about ways that I could beat the system, I was playing with ideas like, okay, well, we know what the speed of light is, but we know what the speed of light is in a vacuum. We know that light slows down when it enters air, and we know it slows down even more when it enters water. Water is 600 times denser than air, 800 times, I forget which. And when light goes from air into water, it decelerates, and that's why it bends. So the speed of light changes. And the less dense the medium is, the faster light goes. Okay. How does that help you in a vacuum? Well, it's true there's nothing in a vacuum, but there's still space-time. There's still the structure of the universe. If you could weaken that structure, if you could thin it out a little bit, just kind of, just sand it down a little bit, thin it out, just put a little paint under there and just spread it out just a little bit. Would light accelerate through that little patch where space-time was a little bit weaker? Light is still doing the speed of light. Nothing's passing it, but the total miles per hour of light is increasing. That was something I dealt with a lot. I also had an idea for about a kind of a drive that basically didn't have anything to do with space. It just lifted you out of time. And so basically you could throw a baseball to Alpha Centauri. The baseball, you give it enough energy to get to Alpha Centauri, and it takes 100 million years or 100 billion years, whatever. But the drive just simply takes it out of time. It's not moving through time. So you turn the drive on, and you turn the drive off, and you're at Alpha Centauri, and you got there at the speed of a thrown baseball at 100 miles an hour. Good enough for story purposes, anyway. So, anyway, what was the answer to that question there about the clock here? The minute hand. I missed the whole thing. Oh, well, doesn't matter. All right, you know what? I'm done with all this deep thinking. My brain hurts. My brain hurts. Neutronium cylinder spinning at extreme, yes. Might bend time, yes. See, isn't that amazing? Doesn't that cause you just a sense of wonder to think what we ground apes are able to do? We're able to figure out things enough to say, well, this is what we think is happening. Experimentally, this is what's happening. So if we did this, what if we did this? Well, we'd have to have this. Well, if we had to have this and we did this, then well, that's not something we could build. But put that aside for a second. What if we could? A gigantic spinning cylinder, a huge mass rotating at a certain RPM could conceivably, and you know what? I'll bet it does too. I'll bet it does. And I think if we got all the cynicism out of our system, went back to living in 1966, because it's always 1966 on the moon, then we would start saying, well, theory says that if we spin a gigantic neutronium cylinder spinning at high enough speed, we might bend time. I say let's build one because it'd be cool. There's no other reason to do it. That's why we do everything. It'd be cool. It'd be fun to find out. And that's why I love humanity so much. That's why I'm so proud of being a human, and why this hatred of ourselves is so appalling to me and such a terrible lie, you know. I saw one of these things on YouTube of what will happen if everybody disappeared, you know, at 9:41 a.m., what would happen to the Earth. That's an interesting thought experiment because it just tells you how things work, right? There's a super chat from IB. We always skip in life at an angle. That's well said. But it's an interesting thought experiment, right? If we just disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? Well, our pets would starve, and then, you know, power would go out within an hour, and then the nuclear plants would blow up, and the last city to be light would be Las Vegas, because Las Vegas is powered by hydroelectric. It would take about a year for Las Vegas to go dark, and then all these things would happen. And then you read the comments, and virtually all of the comments are, oh, I really can't wait for that day. I wish I could see it. You know, oh, that day is going to be great. Just think how happy the Earth is going to be when we're gone. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, it would be so good for the animals. It would be so good for this. If we were a cancer on the planet, planet would kill the planet. Just go away. Go away. Who put that drivel into your head anyway, you know? We are, as far as history, deep history is concerned, we're a strobe light away from swinging down from the trees, and we're walking on other planets. That's one of my favorite conceits about this Major Mace Mattingly thing. Oh, yeah, there are aliens at Area 51, no question. Yep. Yeah, they heard about us. Oh, no, they're not teaching us anything. They came to learn. They came to figure out how we did it so fast. It's astonishing. They can't believe it. It was 60 years between a fabric and wood airplane and walking on another world. Every other civilization in the galaxy has taken 7,000 years to do that. That was the previous record. We did it in 63 or whatever, 66. Okay, well, I think I'm done. Okay, so anyway, this show and the speculations and all the wild and wacky wonderfulness and all the rest of it is all made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who continue to pay for everything here, and including this conversation. And we're very grateful to all of them. And if you're not one, we'd love to have you be one, because it's a cool group of people, the best people I ever met by far. And I learned so much from talking to you guys. So there you go. Starlo wants to say, can you wait? I'm sorry. Veronica says, can you wait until next lifetime to travel faster than light? There is no next lifetime. There is no past lifetime. It's all there all at the same time, which means that probably if I correct about the way the universe is constructed, and I certainly am, then it is really genuinely a case if you can't get there from here. During this show, Elon tweeted, "Starship stacked and ready to launch, waiting FAA approval." Fantastic. You should have that by February, I would hope. Okay, gang. Anyway, thanks very much for the fun talk. As always, just tremendous, and always a pleasure being here. I'm going to wrap up a quick show, get that thing posted, then I'm going home, get some dinner. I'm hungry. Okay, so thanks for joining us. I'm going to sign off on YouTube first. So here we go to the goodbye screen, YouTube, and thanks for joining us. So we'll see you next time. Hooray.